Welcome to another episode of Tell Me About Your Damn Book. I'm your host, Stephen Lomer, and my guest this week is a talented romance author who has come to us from the wilds of New Hampshire. Please welcome Kari Lemor. Kari, welcome. Thank you. Appreciate you coming today. You grew up as one of those kids who read all night under the covers. Once you had your first glimpse of a romance novel at age 12, it was all over. Romance was in your blood. It would be many years before the stories that ran rampant in your head finally drove you to put words on paper. You wrote self-indulgently for the first few years and only recently began penning stories to share with others. You still write stories that are self-indulgent, but you hope others might get some enjoyment from them too. Now that your children are all grown and have moved out, you use your spare time to create stories of love and happily ever after romances where heroes ride to the rescue of damsels who have already saved themselves. You live with your husband in a small town in New England, dreaming of warmer weather, but only if it's near the ocean.
Absolutely. I gotta have water.
Where do you originally hail from?
Haverhill, Mass, so not too far, just south of the New Hampshire border.
Okay. You're published by Lyrical Underground?
Yeah, it's a one of the Kensington
It's
lines.
an imprint of Kensington.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
It was actually, I just, once I finished the first story, I sent it to a few publishers and I got feedback, rejections, but some of them, it was great. And I ended up adding about, it was like 70,000 words. I ended up adding about 17,000, a little bit more of the suspense into it. And just kept, trying to send it out. I sent it out to about a dozen places and got, a dozen rejections. And I was just about ready to put it aside. And I'd been writing other things as well. And I just sent this one to New Year's Eve. I sat and I sent out probably like 8 more, figuring this is it. Well, just if not, I'll move on to another story. Mm-hmm. And couple of weeks later, I got a thing saying, "Oh yeah, like your story, it's going to move up," and so just the slush pile.
Did you ever consider going the indie author route?
I've belonged to a lot of writers groups for a number of years now. I think one of the first, like about 2012, was when I really started going online and connecting with people online. But honestly, being a full-time teacher, I did not have the time. I don't have the knowledge. I can't do the marketing, and I absolutely didn't have the money.
Right.
I mean, as much as I know some people do amazing with it, but as a full-time teacher, and even though my kid, and at the time, a few of the kids were still at home and still, running around, and so. I suppose if I ever got to the point where I hadn't been able to sell something, I may have considered that, but I just didn't have the money or the knowledge or the time.
Sure. That makes sense. Okay. I know nothing of romance books. What makes a good romance book?
Well, I think it depends. It's different for every person. What I love about romance books, one of the biggest things is that they have a happily ever after. I don't want to read something where the person dies at the end.
Do they all have a happily
ever
after?
That is by definition. By definition, that's why sometimes Nicholas Sparks, he doesn't write romance. He writes love stories. Romeo and Juliet was a love story. It was not a romance because, let's face it, that didn't really have a good ending.
No, it did not.
Life. Can I swear?
Go ahead. Yes, by all means.
Life is so crappy anyway. I mean, I shouldn't say that because I have a great life, but let's face it. Let's look out into the world, and I don't want to read stories about people being, beaten and raped and killed and horrible stuff because, and I shouldn't say, because in my stories I write romantic suspense. So there are people who, die, but it's usually not the main characters. Actually, it's never the main characters. So I have happy endings. But people go through a conflict, and it's nice to watch here they are, two people, and for some reason they can't be together. That's the whole premise of a romance novel. Is here are these two people who, have something in common, or they don't, or whatever. There's a conflict, and you watch as they figure out how to overcome that conflict to be together. And I love that. I love seeing how they're going to make it. And I love it when an author can really make me believe that they will have a happily ever after, that in 20, 30, 50 years from now, these two are still going to be together. They're still going to be just, loving each other and,
Okay.
So.
How do you balance, in writing romance, how do you balance the romance and the sex?
I don't write a ton of sex in my books. I do write some.
Okay.
Just because it's romance. Although, I have to say, I just finished a new book. My husband and I had our 30th anniversary up in Bar Harbor last August. Thank you. And we stayed in the same bed and breakfast that we had stayed at during our honeymoon.
Very sweet.
So it was very nice. And so chatting with one of the women there, she was like, "Oh, you got to write about Bar Harbor." And I'm like, "Oh, Bar Harbor is my favorite place in the world." So, of course, on the 5-hour drive home, I plotted 3 new stories because I have a muse that's on steroids.
Sure.
And,
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Now I was just finding the time to write the 1.5 million stories. So I just finished writing this first book. And in it, even though, they're kissing and whatever, I actually, for this couple, because of their situation, when it got to the point where they were going to have sex, I actually just kind of trailed off. And we call that closing the door.
Oh.
So yes, they had sex, but you didn't see it.
Okay.
You saw what led up to it, and then I closed the door. For them, for this story, I thought that was appropriate because it was a second chance romance, so they had been together before and, lots of problems. And I thought they needed their privacy.
What are romance fans like in your experience?
Fans.
Yes.
I'm still waiting to get some of those. So
I'm sure you have fans. I'm sure you have fans.
I'm still a fairly new writer. My first book only came out last March. So last year was a good year for me because I had a book out in March, a book out in July, and a book out in December. So now I'm in the, I have to go and sell these books. The first book actually did pretty well. The ones that I've met so far, I did go to a conference that was a readers conference last fall, and they're so sweet and they're so nice, and the thing that romance writers are also romance readers. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm a voracious reader. I read all the time. I mean, people are like, "Oh, how many books do you read in a year?" And I'm like, "In a year, for a week." But romance writers actually are very they help each other. They are some of the nicest. I've had people who have, I belong to Sisters in Crime, and I know other people who, belong to, mystery writers and all that stuff, and different genre writing groups. And everybody says that the romance writers are the nicest because we believe in love. That's what we write. We write about love, and so because of that, that we practice what you preach.
So it's been an overwhelmingly positive experience.
Oh, it has been amazing, which is one of the reasons I'm retiring from teaching this year. I've got 31 days left, but I'm not counting or anything. Not counting. So yeah, gonna try my hand at doing this full time and see if it, things pick up. Mm-hmm. And but yeah, no, I love getting together with writers. I've joined quite a few little local writers groups, and I love going to conferences and book signings and things like that, and chatting with other writers because it's amazing.
You used to blog.
A
little bit.
And
now you've fallen off of that.
Well, I started my blog, when I first started writing, my original stuff. But between work and trying to write and the, 1 million books that I have to read all the time too, I don't have to, but I want to. Yeah, you know, and I get to the point where it's like, oh, you know, does anybody even read my blog? And so I actually started, because the blog that I have is called The Hopeless Romantic. But now I actually use that page mostly just to help other authors. I put, you know, if somebody's got a book, I'm always like, okay, as long as it has a little bit of romance in it, I am happy to, you know, put your cover, anything you want, you know, give me a blurb, give me a little snippet, and I'll put it up there, and, you know, and then I tweet it out and Facebook it and whatnot. So, you know.
Okay. What do you like to do in your leisure time?
Okay, well, leisure time.
If you have any. If you have any leisure time.
Leisure time, full-time job.
When you're not writing.
Yeah, honestly, I don't really have leisure time. I love to read. I mean, seriously, this is what I do in my leisure. I don't have a whole lot of other hobbies. You know, maybe when the kids were younger, you know, take them out. I have a 4-year-old grandson, so I like hanging out with him occasionally. And my daughter and her husband have a house that's right near a lake, and so they have a boat. So in the summertime, again, that water thing.
Yeah, the water thing, right?
Water, I love, you know, just, you know, growing up in Haverhill, we were, you know, not too far from the ocean, and my grandparents had a place on a lake, and, you know, so yeah, I just love the water. So, you know, go hang out the water. But, you know, if I'm out there, you know, I have a book. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read. I can't think of anything better. I try and teach my students that. It's like, guys, you know, I'm giving you the opportunity to sit and read. You know?
Right.
And I was the student in class who would have the book under the seat.
Under the desk, right?
And you'd be doing this while you're supposed to be doing it, and I'd have, yeah.
Right. So let's talk about that Facebook post of yours where you handed your letter of retirement to your boss saying, goodbye teaching, hello full-time writer. What was that like?
It's funny because a couple people at work now are going, gee, you just seem so much lighter, floating through the air. You know, and it's terrible. I've loved teaching, but I don't love it as much as I used to. And I don't think, it's not that I don't love teaching, it's that teaching has changed. With and not to get like super political or, you know, because we could do a whole couple hours on how education is, but we're testing kids too much, and we're trying to get them to do things that they're not developmentally ready to do.
Interesting.
And when we've got kids, like, you know, you're teaching kindergarten kids, and I taught kindergarten for 20 years, and then now I teach 3rd grade. And what I was teaching in kindergarten, you know, just even 10, 15 years ago, is not what they're teaching now. Kindergarten is now 1st grade. They're teaching, you know, if they're not blending through the vowel and reading by October, you got to get them an intervention. And it's ridiculous because kids are not developmentally ready to do that. It's like saying, you know, if you look at babies, an infant, the average age to walk is 12 to 16 months.
Okay.
That's average.
Yeah. Okay.
Clinically proven average.
Okay.
Are there children who walk at 10 months? Absolutely. The ones you don't want to walk because they get in trouble. But so it's like somebody saying, well, you know, there are kids who walk at 10 months. So, you know what, we want all kids to walk at 10 months. And if they don't walk at 10 months, we're going to give them intervention, and we're going to start doing things to help them walk. Which, you know, you're making a scowling face because you're right, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's completely ridiculous.
It's completely ridiculous, but this is what education has become.
Wow.
There are some kids who can read in kindergarten. Yes, there are. Doesn't mean all of them can, and most of them are not developmentally ready to do it. I teach 3rd grade. We use words. We teach algebra. We use the word algorithm in 3rd grade. We're teaching these kids to do things, these stuff that they have to keep in their head in order to do it. And it's just like, yeah, they don't know what 5 plus 2 is. They haven't figured that, you know, they don't have that stuck in their head yet automatically, but you want them to keep all of this stuff and do all this mental math. And so when you get to the point where I feel like I'm torturing kids, it's time to hang up my teaching degree.
Do you think then that there will be, after sort of your generation, do you think that there will be a dearth of teachers, of people who won't want to get into this for the reasons that you're getting out of it?
Well, right now, and I'm not sure what the latest, but it's about 80% of all teachers in their first 5 years leave the field.
Really?
80%.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. And
Lord.
people are retiring, like at my young age. So yeah, the fact I can only retire because I have a set number of years.
Right.
And so invested in my retirement system. I'm not going to collect them till I'm 60. So we have lots of years.
Right.
Wink,
lots of years.
Lots of years. But yet, a lot of people are just saying, "You got to get out of here."
Who are some romance authors that you admire?
Well, I have some of them are people that I've recently met. Peggy Jaeger is amazing. She also lives in New Hampshire.
Okay.
And she and I have just clicked and connected. And I have a little group that a couple of years ago we went to New York City for the big major national conference. And we have our own little Facebook group. We call ourselves the Fab Four. We had room together, and Emma Grant.
I think that might be trademarked. I'm just saying.
Okay, all right.
I'm just saying.
Okay.
Keep that in mind.
All right. So Emma Grant and another Bryn Kelly. She writes under Bryn Kelly. She also and she writes amazing stuff. She's up for a Rita Award, which is kind of like the big romance writers award that you get during the national convention in the summer. Carrie Nichols is another one. So they're friends that I've met long time ago on some different writing boards. So they've been amazing. I love them. I love people who write similar to me because obviously, again, self-indulgent writer.
Right. Can't forget that.
Yeah. So I mean, there are a lot of people who you say they're definite one-clicks. Monica McCabe, who also writes for Kensington, and I probably wouldn't have ever looked at her stuff if it wasn't for the fact that she was a sister author from Kensington, and her stuff is great. She writes romantic suspense, and she has a lot more worldly suspense. Mine takes place in Connecticut, but she has Africa and Japan, and she's world traveled. Stephanie London is a woman that I met again years ago online, and a couple of these people I've actually met in real life, and it's so amazing when you meet them in real life because it's like you've known them forever.
Sure.
You've been talking to them, and so Stephanie has lighthearted banter and very very cool. She's young. She's like in her early 30s, so she can write that young stuff. Me, I'm an old biddy, so I have to pretend.
Okay, so we have a gimmick on this show that we are contractually obligated to live up to. So, Kari Lemor.
Tell me about your damn book.
Okay, well, so I chose to talk about the second book, Running Target. The book is Jack Holland is an FBI agent. He is, at the beginning, he's undercover as a chauffeur for a mob boss, Victor Cabrini. And Victor's son, Angelo, has this friend, Callie. And Callie is basically camouflage for Angelo. Angelo's gay, doesn't want his father to know that he's gay, so he uses Callie. She realizes they're just friends. And so Jack and Callie actually have a little fling. And so the book starts with Angelo basically confronting Jack, saying, stay away from Callie. He has found out that she's pregnant. And this is so she hasn't found out yet. The doctor had just done a test, told Angelo, thinking he was the father, and so Angelo stabs Jack, tries to kill him, and Jack somehow manages to rip the knife from him. And he manages, as Angelo's hovering over him, gloating, he stabs him, and Jack stumbles off. So Angelo, this is all the first chapter, and you can read this for free online. I think on Barnes & Noble they have the first chapter for free. So Jack is on the run. Angelo ends up dying, And so he's a running target.
It's book 2 of the series. Book 1 is Wild Card Undercover.
Yep.
Book 2 is Running Target. And book 3 is Fatal Evidence.
Yes.
And you published them all in 2017.
I did.
So you had them all set beforehand.
The first 2 books were written when I contracted. The second book, actually Running Target, was a total mess. It had so many plot holes, but I actually had won. I was at a conference and I had won a 25-page critique from Deb Dixon, who is, I don't know if you've heard of her. She's a romance author, editor, whatever, but she is the author of this one book called GMC, Goal, Motivation, Conflict, which is kind of the Bible for most romance writers, and actually for anybody. So it's a great book. And she had helped, plug a few holes and whatnot. And then I sat online with my critique partner who lives in Alaska, and we went through it with a fine-tooth comb. And it's funny because at one point she goes, "Oh," because I didn't originally have Angelo being gay. And she's like, "Oh, well, I thought," and I went, "Oh, wait a minute. That will fix like 6 of the holes." I was so excited. Sometimes things just don't come to you. So This is why you need a critique partner.
Sure.
So I had to clean that up a little bit and plug some holes and whatnot. But it's funny because when you ask people, Running Target is the favorite of most of them.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good.
So
then I'm glad that that's the damn book you chose to talk
about. The damn book
that
well, and it's second. The first book sold pretty well. The second, it's trying to, get momentum going. So, hopefully when people read the first, they'll go and, "Oh, hey, look, she's got another book."
And another beyond that.
And another beyond that.
Yeah.
And I have a few more stories that I can, because I've introduced a few characters in there. So I could actually have 3 more beyond that, but it's a matter of getting the publisher to say, sure.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
If I was selling 10,000 copies, then, I probably could, write my ticket, but, so.
Okay. We're all struggling authors. It's fine.
Oh, yeah.
We have a segment on the show called Questions from the Great Unwashed. And these are social media questions that have been submitted for you. You never know what you're going to get. It's always a mixed bag. Sometimes they're deep, sometimes they're a little nuts. But I will present them to you. Feel free to answer them or ignore them as you choose.
I'll just get up and walk out.
You could do that too.
Okay.
That would be a first, but go ahead. So the first question is from Joanne from New Hampshire. She asks, "What's your Patronus?"
You know what? I'd have to say maybe a giraffe.
Tommy from Rhode Island would like to know, what's the hardest cut you ever had to make to a book?
Hardest cut? Well, I have a new series that is currently, being pushed from my agent to publishers. It's called The Storms of New England. The family's name is Storm.
Okay.
And the first book came out at 125,000 words.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I don't write short.
Wow.
So in order to pitch it to a couple different places, I'm like, I probably should cut some. So it's now about 104,000. So that was a very difficult cut. It wasn't one particular scene, but it was over 20,000 words.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely a brutal cut.
Yeah.
Billion21 would like to know, what other writing genres intrigue you?
I do read a lot of children's books because being a third grade teacher. So I mean, if I had to, read some other, I am a bit of a science fiction geek. I like all the if it's a star in it, chances are I've watched it. Star Wars, Star Trek, Stargate. Actually, right now I'm going through a binge watch of Enterprise. Okay. So science fiction is something that, I as long as it's not like Alien. Yeah, I'm not into that, but I mean, I actually have great admiration for anybody who can write science fiction or any kind of other world, because the amount of energy it takes to create that
Sure.
is amazing.
Clever Trousers 89 asks, what would you change about yourself if you could?
What I change about myself physically? No.
I don't know what
No.
Clever Trousers is going for here.
You know, I would say I would have started writing earlier.
Ah.
I wish I had started because I didn't start writing until I was in my 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I'm over 40. So I would have started writing earlier because I had all these stories in my head, just never thought to put them on paper. I mean, that was like, no, I didn't like writing. So yeah, I wish if I could change something, I would have wanted to start writing earlier.
Yeah.
So that, you
Me
know.
too. Me too. Callie Anderson 420 asks, are you a meticulous planner or does your writing all flow organically?
I will plan, and I have sheets where I have character sheets, and it's like, who are these people, you know? And so I will write up little notes as to who they are, what's their background, what are they like. And then I want to know, before I start writing a book, I have to know, you know, what is the conflict, you know? And in romance, a lot of times, well, especially romantic suspense, you might have an emotional conflict, but then you also have, you know, like the bad guy who's, you know, that's a conflict too. So I need to know what all of that is before I write. I kind of need to know where are they going to? How am I going to fix this? But then once I have that information, you know, I actually use Scrivener, and so I love Scrivener because I use the little corkboard.
Yep.
And I will, you know, like, okay, well, here's a scene. And so I just write a little snippet of the scene and I put it on all the little cards on the cork, and then I can rearrange them and whatnot. So I will plan a lot of what I want, but not everything. Just I have a scene in mind, and it's like, okay, that doesn't mean that these are the only scenes I'm going to do, because I find so many times I'll get, it's like, okay, we need to have this. So I will plot to a certain degree. You know, I know who the characters are. I do need to know what the conflict is. Because as you're going along, it's like you need to make sure that you show that conflict. And it's not just, you know, especially in romance, you know, it's not just people going out on a date. You know, that's kind of boring.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So you need to have this, the internal conflict and the external conflict. So it's like the external conflict is what brings them together, and the internal conflict is what keeps them apart, keeps them from being together.
Sure.
So I have to know what that is beforehand. But then I sit down and I just start writing, and you know, if you're anything like me, it's like you go, oh wow, you know, you go back and you read it and you go, I wrote that? Wow. Sometimes you go, oh.
Yeah,
And sometimes you go, wow, I don't remember writing that.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great feeling. Unless you know, have that,
The
who wrote this
yeah.
crap. Yeah, exactly. And then finally, Hope from Florida asks, what city inspires you?
What city? Okay, well then I guess, city, I would have to say Bar Harbor.
Okay.
Bar Harbor is my favorite place in the world. It just, not that I've been very many places. I'm sorry, I don't even own a passport. But that's why, you know, the new story that I just wrote that takes place or I shouldn't say Bar Harbor, it takes place on Mount Desert Island, which is, you know, right near Bar Harbor. But yeah, you know, my husband and I, we went up there the year before we got married, and then we realized we wanted to go there for a honeymoon, and then we didn't go for a couple of years because we're busy having kids. But then once the kids were a little bit older, we went up every single year with the kids, and it's the most amazing place. It's absolutely gorgeous. You know, of course, you know, we don't go up in January. I might have a little different opinion.
Right. No one in their right mind would go up in January.
No. But yeah, so Bar Harbor.
Okay.
I just absolutely love it.
Okay, great. And this is the question that I end all of the interviews with. I've asked all of the authors this. It's 100 years in the future. We're all dead and gone, hopefully. There's a young person who goes into a library, hopefully there are still libraries, and approaches the librarian and asks about Kari Lemor. what does the librarian say to the young person about you?
Well, I mean, I'm hoping that they'll, have heard of me. But I'd like to be known for being, a good writer, somebody who, could tell a good story, who, wrote character-driven books, and because I do get a lot of people like, oh, I love your characters, and so you want to read something that's got a little bit of danger, a little bit of little steam, little danger, but good relationships, and hopefully they'll be saying that I was good at that. I was good at weaving those pieces together.
Nice. Yes, I hope they will be saying that 100 years from now.
Thank you.
Well, that's all the time we have for this episode of Tell Me About Your Damn Book. I'd like to thank Kari Lemor for joining us today. The book is Running Target. Go out and buy it. It's excellent. And cheers.